This is how we see it. Palestinians see that peace will bring security, versus a reading from the Israeli side that sees that security will bring peace. So again, we get into that absolute security equation from an Israeli perspective. At least this is how we read it, in the sense that it would bring for Israelis the peace, versus our position, which is let's have the peace and security will come along after that.
Yes.
It's a pleasure to be here. And I'm going first, not because I'm the only woman on the panel, but because I have to leave you very shortly after I present. So please bear with me as I set the tone. I probably will leave it for you to reset the tone. But generally speaking, third party in this conflict. I think we've had, I'll make a general comment, I suppose, on the role of third parties from a Palestinian perspective, obviously, and then take it on the issue of, as it relates to security, and the proposals that have been entertained over the years. Generally speaking, we Palestinians prefer the approach of bilateral negotiations. However, the bilateral negotiations have really not been able to produce the tangible results to the end of conflict that we were obviously hoping for. We had thought that this conflict, after all of these years, would reach the end of the conflict within an agreed period of time. Obviously, all of you know, and I'm not telling you anything you don't know, that the bilateral approach has not worked. We can analyze back and forth the issues as to why and why not. We can lay blame here and there, but that's really not the core. The core is that bilateralism has not been able to produce the results in a timely fashion. In the meantime, on the ground, we continue to have the status of the occupation and the growth of the settlements. And for those of us who live in Jerusalem, and obviously many of you probably are from the Jerusalem area, note our plight as Palestinian in respect of the Jerusalem situation and the holy sites and so forth and so on. Obviously, also we have not yet addressed the refugee problem, and that continues to be a critical issue with respect to a prolonged state of the conflict where bilateralism has not been able to put an end to these issues. Now, over the years, and based on our experiences, we have toyed and introduced the notion of having a third party in the negotiations. This has become dubbed as the broker involved in negotiations. Also, for obvious reasons that probably my colleagues would go into, and I won't belabor them too much, the selection, somehow, the natural selection, if you will, and the evolution led us to have the US play that role. Obviously, we've had our ups and downs with the American involvement, American interests, Israeli interests, Palestinian needs, Palestinian demands, and so forth have dictated a certain role that the US, from a Palestinian perspective, has not been able to fulfill. And I won't speak on the Israeli side, probably might be something that Gershon would be able to shed the light on. Some involvement was successful, which were there was a direct commitment, direct involvement, and a commitment to be committed over time until we see an arrangement within the context of the agreements concluded, like the roadmap or the access and movement agreement. There we had success in concluding an arrangement subordinated to the Oslo agreements. However, of course, the implementation and the enforcement were a totally different story. Then we had other not so successful, if I may say so, involvements during the attempt by Senator Mitchell during the proximity talks. That was another model that did not yield any tangible results, nor allowed the parties to even approximate and get closer together in their positions. Obviously, it's very complex. I don't need to tell you how complex the issues themselves are, but I think the different attempts and mechanisms that were introduced did not again produce those results that the Palestinian side was hoping for. Nevertheless, we continue to insist on having some sort of a third party. We would like to have an active third party role in the negotiations to facilitate and to bridge, because both sides, from our perspective, have reached points of such positions where we are too unable, if you will, on our own to make the required compromises. I mean, this whole conflict is again about reaching compromises. So the question becomes, what kind of compromises based on what kind of interests would be issues that we need facilitation on. So to conclude on this very point, do we favor, do we encourage third-party participation? The answer is yes, at this moment in time. So we moved from a position that was totally bilateral negotiations to actually welcoming, and not only welcoming, but also favoring third-party presence and third-party facilitation and even third-party bridging. And this is, I believe, where we are today, and we look forward to that role. Why the US, not other European powers, other non-European powers? That's a function not of our own choice, but it's a function of the relationship with the Israeli side, and whom Israel would be also comfortable with. I turn now to the issue that I prepared for today, which is more related to the security matter. Again, third party in the security context stemmed also from our inability as two parties to the conflict to even begin tapping into the issues of security. Because obviously the core issues that have remained outstanding include security, and security has been core for the Israeli side and obviously core to the Palestinian side. So to begin with, and to give assurances to the Israeli side in various sets of negotiations, the notion of a third party was introduced. What does that mean is something that I will get into. So we introduced, to give comfort to the Israeli side, we introduced the notion of a demilitarized state, third party, again, participation, presence, we will parse it out, and also the swaps also were part of, land swaps that is, were part of the whole security arrangement or equation, if you will, that we were willing to discuss and detail with the Israeli side, again here with third-party participation. Now the issue of a third party in security arrangements, in my mind, and to me and to the Palestinian negotiator, raises more questions really than answers the questions, because the variations and the forms are many. So I raise the questions today more than I actually give any particular model or any recommendation or any analysis as to a favorable position on the third party role. to the microphone. Okay. So, well, your hand tends to slip because it's in your face.
Uncomfortable.
Yeah, it is actually. So the questions I raise are really along those lines. Is a third party or third parties, even in negotiations, is their involvement in security a factor to enhance the prospects for peace? Will they enhance? And if so, what role will they play? What is the scope of that role? What powers, what functions would they exercise? Would they have a facilitative role versus a diagnostic role? Would it be, as we are negotiating, would it be after an agreement is reached, would they play a role afterwards? And what kind of role would be played by the third party during and after? So those are also timing issues. Will the third party or parties assist the negotiators and the parties, again, during the negotiations to set out the parameters of the security-related issues? Or will they play a role in implementation? Who will be that third party or third parties? Will they actually facilitate or will they create more challenges to the negotiators if it were during a negotiations phase? Or will they, as a player coming in after the agreements are concluded, would they be able to facilitate, again, the enforcement and so forth and so on? So if I were the way I've set out the questions would lead me to the next set of ideas, which is from a Palestinian, what is the political security Palestinian paradigm? And here I offer the following. There's a shift from our perspective from land for peace to end occupation to security for peace to end the stalemate that we are currently in and the occupation. So we've added a layer, in my opinion, to the land for peace equation and moved it to include as even a larger issue, security for peace, and from my perspective, would this security for peace end the current stalemate we have today in the negotiations so that we reach that whole scenario of ending occupation and reaching the agreement? Because from today, I also lay out the current situation for you. Currently, Palestinian obviously independence and sovereignty are totally detracted from for security, among other issues, which I'm not discussing. I'm focusing again on security. So our independence and our sovereignty are detracted from, subject to Israeli security needs. I also state from a negotiator's perspective that if I were in negotiations and Israel is requesting absolute security, I offer to say that this is not attainable because there is no such thing as absolute security. However important it is and how much we the Palestinians recognize and have been working and coordinating closely with the Israeli side. In fact, on security matters, it's been one of those greatest successes so far, despite the breaches in security and so forth and that we witness, and I don't belittle those, but I mean, I also offer to share with you from our perspective that security coordination cooperation has been a very positive element of the relationship to date, although we are in a very serious stalemate and are unable to move forward on negotiations. That said, I also recognize that, or offer to state that the security interests of both sides need not be mutually exclusive nor antagonistic as we go into the future with our negotiations. Because this is how we see it. Palestinians see that peace will bring security, versus a reading from the Israeli side that sees that security will bring peace. So again, we get into that absolute security equation from an Israeli perspective. At least this is how we read it. in the sense that it would bring for Israelis the peace, versus our position, which is let's have the peace and security will come along after that. Why do we say so, and why do we hold this position? Because we believe that reaching an agreement to end the conflict will diminish the use of force among the two parties to the conflict. And where do we build our security notions on, or what do we build them on? We build them on mutual and reciprocal security interests that reinforce each other, and both security interests are legitimate. This is how the equation would read, or the formula would read, and therefore then we would be able to achieve those strategic security interests for both sides within the context of a demilitarized Palestinian state. On the issue of security and sovereignty, we believe that an Israeli withdrawal from all the Palestinian territories and on our airspace and territorial water, having no residual Israeli presence or control, would be a basic requirement for the security arrangements that we would reach. Mind you that we would be willing to negotiate, obviously, the comfort zone that Israel requires and needs on security. And in this respect, a third party would play a role. Why do we want a withdrawal from the Palestinian territory, airspace, and territorial waters? Is because we're currently, again, our interests today are subordinated to those of Israeli interests, and therefore we have diminished capacity, and we will be unable to perform beyond coordination. Coordination is good and works for now, but again, because it detracts from independence and detracts from sovereignty, we don't believe it is sustainable, and therefore we seek to have, again, full control over our land, our territory, airspace, and territorial waters, so that we won't have ultimately a diminished relationship on security between the two sides. On the issue, I wanted to also raise the issue of the so-called informal arrangements that took place after the withdrawal from Gaza, to give an example of how unilateralism on security and the informality, when it's unilateral and not between two states or two negotiated, you're not negotiating even that kind of arrangement, would have a negative, an adverse impact. Because the informality in Gaza left a lot of residual effects and created a hostile standoff rather than a coordinated and stable and peacefully related regime. There's hostility continued. So when you have informal arrangements and you have unilateral arrangements, or not arrangements, or actions, then you really maintain the state of hostility. And this is what is happening today in Gaza. Let me move on to the issue of the international presence in terms of how it's going to, the forms it will take. Again, there are different forms and different models and different structures. So we can have observers, we can have peacekeepers, we can have protection forces, we can have monitoring and verification arrangements, or we can have supervision. Within those 5 models, we can have hybrids, and we can have different types of roles, and prescribe, again, the different kind of membership of these within those 5 categories. Again, we would want to examine whether the role would be temporary, permanent, what kind of, if transitional, what kind of a transitional term, what kind of a duration will it have, what would be the mandate of the international force, would it be advisory, would it, will it consist of professional security forces, or will it consist of State-related security forces, again, how do you make the selection? What kind of composition would you have? Would it have a political role or a political function? Would it be something that stems from existing forces like NATO or from the UN? What role would US, EU, Arab states play into this whole force? Again, those are all open questions and without any clear answers, because the arrangements can be many. And the models and the categories and the criteria also vary. Now, what would be the, if you will, the role or the goals, objectives of a third party? I start with the following. Would it be preventive measures? Would it be crisis management? Would it be control of illegal weapons and ammunition? Would it be control of incitement? Would it be interception, reinforcement, manned observation, monitoring? Would it be, I mean, in terms of not breaches by the parties, would it have a power to impose sanctions? In our context, Palestinian context, would it be able to provide training, capacity building? Would it have a dispute resolution power? Would it be joint operations with Israelis and Palestinians as a multinational force? All of these, again, questions are open-ended, but are issues that were yet to be discussed and entertained in full. I also raise other issues for the implementation or the enforcement phase. What would happen if the role of this third party, however it is defined, whatever the mandate is, fails? What would happen? How would it be in the case of emergency or attacks, external attacks? How would it be mobilized? How would the Palestinian forces, the Israeli forces, be mobilized within the context of having third party? And again, in emergency, what would you do? Other issues that are also open-ended without concrete answers at the moment are where will the third party or third parties be present? Are they present at the external borders? Are they present at the crossings? Are they present at the joint borders? Airports, roads, seaports, where the location where would they be, and wherever they end up being located, what role, what mandate, what function would they play? I conclude with some of the current experiences, again, without really analyzing these experiences. It's more descriptive rather than analytical, because I don't want to give conclusive remarks here. There is currently there's the Sinai model, where you have, after the withdrawal, after the peace treaty between Egypt and Israel, there's a force in Sinai. It's a multinational force, Israel, Egypt, and the US. It has been working, so there are some breaches, but that's a success model. Again, no success in the, I don't want to, again, judge, but it's a working, let me put it this way, it's a working model as opposed to successful. Then inside the territories here, there is the TIF. The TIF is in Hebron. It's more observation rather than actual involvement. It doesn't carry weapons, right? So basically, it is another model that has had some positive impact. But again, this is another model on the soft side, if you will. It has worked sometimes, it has not worked some other times, but the conclusion to this is that having a third party inside the territories to observe, if you will, actions of both sides and monitor without intervention has been something that has been working here. again, as I said, as I conclude, I mean, I raised really more questions than I give answers, and I hope that I was able to impart to you with some clarity the Palestinian concerns and the Palestinian issues, because it's a security issue, and the third party are important issues for us. A security for both of us, the Israelis and the Palestinians, the legitimate needs of both sides. If not properly addressed, I don't think we will be able to have a working arrangement on security. But it's important for us to stress that any arrangement, mutual arrangement between states, cannot detract from sovereignty and from independence. And that will be a key issue for us when we enter negotiations. And we would hope that a third party in this respect, whoever they are, would be able to objectively and neutrally assist both sides to reach that point, because absent that kind of objectivity and neutrality, the success would be very, very limited, I'm afraid. Thank you for listening.